Okay, so we'll call Don, Mike, and Rich up to the stage, and they'll give some of their observations and the backstory of the film. While they're coming up, we'll get the chairs out. A few announcements. We know the Gibraltar date is wrong on your tickets, but the times are right. So we dock in Gibraltar tomorrow, and the touring is morning and afternoon sessions tomorrow. Also, if you could, this evening, make your choices for Valencia. We have the forms at the excursion desk across from reception. And you'll be receiving that health form, the updated health form, out in your mail slots or in your cabins tonight. Turn those in before you depart for the excursions tomorrow. That's sort of your last step you need in order to get off the ship. So we'll have our things here. We have our microphones ready, and now turn it over to our historians.
Everybody notice that scene at the end where Louis picks up the bottle of Vichy water and then throws it into the garbage can?
Everybody like the movie? Okay, let's start with a little backstory on this. The movie actually is based on a play called Everyone Comes to Rick's. It was created in 1940. It was never published, but it was picked up by Warner Brothers for this movie. The backstory on that play is it was written by two authors, Murray Burnett and Joan Allison. Burnett was a Cornell graduate who was teaching high school in New York City, wanted to be a playwright. He inherited some money from an uncle. He went to visit his wife's parents in Belgium. She was Jewish, he was nominally Jewish. They sent him and his wife to Austria to attempt to get out some relatives from there. He arrived after the Anschluss. He saw Nazi-occupied Austria firsthand. He became involved in the refugee trail that you see here. In the course of doing this, there was a small cafe outside of Nice, France, which was the prototype for Rick's. After the movie became extremely famous, there was an article, a book published, that claimed that the original play really did not have that much to do with what the movie Casablanca is, and that was later recanted by the author because basically it is the plot, it is the characters. The letters of transit are there. The Ilsa character, who was changed in the movie from what she was in the play, nonetheless asks for, as time goes by, be played. There's a Negro piano player that's in it, and there's also the dueling singing scene that ends Act 2 that's so memorable for everyone to see. Large swaths of the dialogue that are in the movie are also in that original play. The movie, the play reached Warner Brothers. They paid for it, and a reviewer was writing the initial review of the script, and he wrote, "Excellent melodrama, colorful, timely background, tense mood, suspense, psychological and physical conflict, tight plotting, sophisticated hokum." I've seen that term used in reviewing quite a bit of my work over the years, and I always wonder where it came from. I know it comes from there. There was a movie critic, Kenneth Turner, who wrote, I think, one of the nicest little commentaries summing it up. He says, "The finished film manages the feat of being as political as it is romantic, a story where humor, idealism, cynicism, espionage, melodramatics, and even deadly gunplay all play a part. It's almost like a whole season of films crammed into a single 102-minute film." The movie originally debuted in November 1942 in New York City. The original review by Bosley Crowther, who was then the leading film critic, he called it a picture that makes the spine tingle and the heart leap. And of course, Warner Brothers got the enormous advantage of the fact that Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt met in Casablanca in January 1943, which was a publicity boom, obviously, for the film itself. The writing of the script that actually appears in the film was really dominated by three of the screenwriters. Two of them were Philip and I know, but the other brother's name, whatever, just a second here. Philip and Julius Epstein. Two brothers. They were a family of Jewish immigrants from the Soviet Union. They had actually graduated from Penn State University. a classic coming up from nothing story from America. And they were best noted for writing very clever, witty dialogue. They brought in a third writer named Howard Koch, who wanted to add a lot of the political element to it. And there was a third playwright, scriptwriter, who was involved, who was brought in to actually look at the romantic scenes. And so you can see the trails of all of them throughout the film. But that dialogue, obviously, is classic. It's widely taught as an episode in script writing in all of American film history. Among the accolades that the movie has gotten over the years, the American Film Institute has a number of little categories they use. One is in the greatest quotes. This movie has 6 on the list of 100, which is the most of any single movie that's ever been published up to date. The song, As Time Goes By, is number 2 on the all-time hit songs of movie music, second only to Over the Rainbow and not Gone with the Wind, and What Was the Oz of Every Day. There's just so many dimensions of this film that are so marvelous and marveled upon now as we look back. Yet it was basically a standard production of Warner Brothers, production number 410 in 1942. There were about 5 other movies being shot at the same time. They were doing basically about a movie a week. It's not true that they were rewriting and rewriting everything daily to do this. They did have a full script. There was some discussion about how the movie should end. There was also considerable concern about whether the censor outfit, the Hayes Board, would permit them to do what they did, particularly given the character of Elsa and her relationship with Rick, whether they would get by with it. They wrote it to make it, work in terms of the censorship that was acceptable, or whatever. So you could have Elsa on a wild fling with Rick, and while she's still married. So I have to explain that she was not married when that was happening. So that's sort of the basic background, and let me turn it over to my colleagues for their insightful commentary on cinema.
I got a few things I want to point out. There were 2 mistakes in the film. If you could point them out, we'll make sure that Nate gets you a prize at the end of this. If you don't, I'll point them out. A couple things. You guys did notice the Vichy water. Any American watching the movie would have understood exactly what that meant. It's, of course, lost to a lot of people 80 years later. You know the difference between being in unoccupied France and occupied France. There is a legal difference. So the route for refugees out of occupied France is from occupied France to Oran in Algeria, which now puts them under Vichy's neutral authorization, from which they can legally travel to Casablanca and then try to get out to Lisbon. So again, this distinction between occupied and unoccupied France is really, really important. And you also saw the dangerously exposed position these refugees are in, with Captain Reno saying, another visa problem has come up, Captain. These refugees are desperate. And even the one with the former president of Deutsche Bank is now our pastry chef, right? The way that these people are having to do whatever's necessary, and this film treats it lightly, but it's of course a deadly serious subject. The direct question that Humphrey Bogart asks, Louis, are you pro-Vichy or free French? And his reluctance to answer the question gets to that point I was making this morning about attentisme. He even says, I will wait for the winds to change, right? There's nothing I can do now. And just 2 more things that I wanted to point out, then I'll point out the two quick mistakes if anybody caught them. Conrad Veidt, who plays Major Strasser, had a Jewish wife, so that's the reason he left Germany and was in Hollywood playing that character. He's not unusual. There were a number of German actors who were either banned by the Nazis or had Jewish spouses or some other such thing. Anybody pick up on the 2 errors? The 2 things that they got wrong? See if you got it.
I don't think the major had the right insignia for his rank.
Oh, I don't know. That I don't have any idea about. Sorry, I apologize. You might be right. You might be right.
And the other one was
You might be right.
was Laszlo and Ilsa changed sides all the way through the movie while they were sitting there. Started on the right, ended on the left, started on the right.
Oh, I didn't recognize that either. So now we're really picking on the film.
America sleeping in December 1941, was that date off?
No, I don't think the date's off. I think that's okay.
Would Major Strasser have been driving himself rather than have been driven?
Perhaps. I mean, there's a lot of kind of things to make the plot go. We'll give one more shot here, then I'll throw it out.
Yeah, that's right. That they left him with an elector, which was an American
Oh no. the two that I was thinking about, who are the letters of transit signed by? De Gaulle. Why would that matter to Vichy France or Germany? It wouldn't matter at all. They don't recognize de Gaulle as anything. So the signature of de Gaulle on the letters of transit would mean nothing. And the other thing, see if you got it?
The German 77s as opposed to the German 88s.
Yeah, the Germans did have 77, so I don't know what they would have used in 1940. The other one, remember when Captain Reno says, I was with the Americans when they blundered into Berlin in 1918.
Yeah.
The United States never went to Berlin in 1918. Right, so anyway, you may all be correct in what you pointed out, but the historian in me, the Charles de Gaulle one, I imagine, is put in there on purpose, because by the time this film was made, de Gaulle was extremely, or well, I shouldn't say that, de Gaulle was gaining in popularity among the American people, if not among the Roosevelt administration. So there would have been an association of the name Charles de Gaulle with Free France. But of course, neither Captain Reno nor Major Strasser would have had any reason to acknowledge the signature of de Gaulle.
One other quick point to note. There are only 3 American citizens who are in this movie. Bogart, Dooley Wilson, the piano player, and Joy Page, who plays the wife of the Bulgarians trying to get out. She was Jack Warner's niece, which probably accounts for her role in the movie. There was the guy who was the doorman was born in America, but he wasn't an American. There are approximately 75 actors and actresses in the movie who were not American. They were overwhelmingly people who had lived the refugee experience coming out. Madeleine LeBeau, who's the woman who comes around to sing so memorably Le Marseillaise, whatever here, she became a symbol of the whole, when she died, the French culture minister mentioned that she was sort of the symbol of the whole resistance movement. At the time, she was married to the guy who was the croupier, who had been a very famous actor, as was Peter Lorre, who does a very memorable turn in this thing. This movie has so many memorable lines. When I was a kid growing up and we were all smitten with this thing, one of the things my little group did frequently was rather than say, I'm going to the bathroom, we would say, I need to run some guns to Ethiopia.
Is my mic? Yeah, my mic's on. A couple things. The film was made by Warner Brothers. Controversial studio at the time because they were making films like this. Of course, production began when America was still non-interventionist, and that was controversial. But the Warner Brothers stuck to their guns on this one and hired one of the greatest directors of all time, Howard Curtis, and went on to do some great work, documentary work in World War II with Frank Capra. And the other thing is, watching this thing, I've watched it so many times and read so many books about it. There's a lot of characters, unbelievable characters, Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre and this and that. But there's another character, and that's the cause. And it's just shot through the film. And those kind of films have a kind of an irresistible draw to them. But with this one, it's not over sentimentalized. Maybe like The Sound of Music, for example. It's a tough kind of film. And when I watch it, I think of a number of things. I was just thinking about this. I never thought about it before, but on the cause thing, a little anecdote. A number of years ago, I was in Spain with a group of international brigaders. They were recruited by Moscow to fight with the Republicans and against the fascists. And this was the return. I was in Spain with other brigaders from Germany, from France, from Belgium, from all over Europe. And this was their first return to Spain since they left in 1938 and 39. And the American brigaders were called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. The Communist Party usually disguised the titles to give it a kind of an American patriotic note. And But although a lot of these people were so-called duped by the Communist Party, they had incredible faith in their cause, incredible idealism, and they were kind and wonderful people. And we were in a cafe on the Ebro River, where the final battles of the Civil War were fought. And we went into the cafe, and there were a lot of us. And wouldn't you know it, there were a bunch of Francophiles in there, and they had their Franco berets on, and I thought, oh my God, we're in for big trouble here. We just had a big to-do when I took them unbelievably into a Spanish rest home, a hospital for veterans, and in there were some Franco people, and we almost had a punch-out in there. But we're in the cafe, and the Franco people started singing a patriotic song from 37 that was very popular with the nationalists. And spontaneously, the French stood and began singing the Marseillaise. And everyone joined in. And it was the most emotional moment of my life. It was unbelievable. It was so stirring. And I think Spielberg, I was talking to him about coming on this trip, and he said the most emotional scene maybe in all of film was that scene there, the central theme, you know, being the cause. It drives everything. So it's great filmmaking, and it's great history. It's great history. Any questions?
Just one more thing I want to.
Cigarettes to put everybody down.
What's that?
Smoked
They
enough
smoked
cigarettes.
enough cigarettes in there.
Yeah, on that-
Sure did.
Yeah.
Sure did.
Let me just finish. The director, Michael Curtiz, had some issues with English. One day he was very unhappy with what a boy with a few pages of script was doing, and he said, "The next time I have to send a silly fool, I'll go myself." And when he won the Oscar for Best Director, he said, "Always a bridesmaid, never a mother. Now I win, I have no speech."
Standing ovation.
Yeah.
And the other great quote about this is that there may be better films than Casablanca, but there's never been a better loved film than Casablanca.
I'll go here and then we'll go back.
You mentioned that there were 6 lines that made the top 100 for the American Film Institute, but then you left us hanging, didn't tell us what those 6 lines were. Do you have those there?
Let's see if we can do this, okay? Two that reputedly, it seems to be pretty solid, were invented by used by Humphrey Bogart himself spontaneously. One is, "Here's looking at you, kid." And then the quote that goes, starts, "Of all the gin joints in all the world, she walks into mine." We'll always have Paris. There you go. Round up the usual suspects. Where's that been? Hal Wallace, the producer, came up with the final line. "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." So where are we now? We're at 5. Play it again. Oh, and play it again. Sam. Play it again. Okay, there we got it.
Those aren't the 6, by the way. But they are 6 interesting ones. Yeah. You might have been wondering, perhaps, I guess a lot of people did when they saw the film, whether there was a romantic relationship off screen between Bogey and Ingrid Bergman, and there wasn't. He was a cold guy, and those who were on set said that when he did a scene, he retreated to his trailer, stayed there until he was called on again. She was married at the time. She left her husband and her young son behind, did the film, and it's the beginning, really, of Bogey. He played a bunch of gangsters before this, gangster films, and but this is the beginning of the Bogart of African Queen and whatever. Yeah. Well, Maltese Falcon was before this.
That was before. That was.
And actually, the interesting thing, you were talking, Rich, about buying the rights to the film, and these are 2 unknowns, the young couple that he mentions, and they paid $20,000 for the film, and they paid 10 for the Maltese Falcon. So everybody in studio was tremendously impressed with the play, and the movie sticks pretty closely to the play. It stays pretty closely to the play. Although Koch does, as Rich said, really reintroduce the war themes and frames this very, very nicely, despite the awful Berlin mistake. Yeah.
The other, you lost me here. Whatever. Let's go. Let's go.
Just out of curiosity, Victor Laszlo character, is he based on anything real in some respect? And
He is.
and on top of that,
Yeah.
what was the significance of the gent trying to show him the Free French ring with the cross of Lorraine? Because he was Czechoslovakian, according to the play.
The Croix de Lorraine, that symbol that's on his ring, is the symbol of Free France. So we talked about this a little earlier, but I mean, you really can see, starting with the Spanish Civil War, where the First World War is a war between nation states. The Second World War you really can understand as a war between ideologies. So in France you have Vichy, which is leaning to the right, and you have the French Resistance, which is leaning to the left. Not always, but sometimes. It's complicated. Spain, you have the Spanish Civil War, which is really a right versus left. So in the Second World War, you have these resistance movements, and there's a new book about to come out on the European world, the European-wide resistance, that there is an ideological kind of consistency to. And Don mentioned these folks that were part of the Communist Party who then turn and fight against the fascists. The British actually had a phrase for this because they didn't want to call them communists during the Second World War, because now Soviet Russia is your ally, so they called them premature anti-fascists. And so it's this kind of, the way that ideologies are lining up. So that symbol of the Croix de Lorraine is not just the French resistance, it is the symbol of resistance more generally to the Nazis.
I don't want to read too much into this, but it's a very American film, and it's the way it's plotted, the way it's paced, and particularly, the way it reflects the country. I mean, it moves from non-intervention to intervention, just as the country's moving from non-intervention after Pearl and with Torch to fighting, for the cause, for the good cause. And it's like a lot of American Westerns. It's the tough American, the individualist, the guy who's seemingly doesn't believe in anything, but he's got a big heart, and that's kind of the way America likes to see itself, going and helping the underdog, and being understated about it, and being cool about it. You can see this in Clint Eastwood movies, that sort of thing, and. So I think the writers are thinking a lot about that kind of thing. The film as a representation, and Rick as a representation of a certain type of American, kind of American we'd like to be, not bragging, downplaying things, always understating things. The wise guy and things like this, but the wise guy with a real heart, and as Springsteen would say, he's got a hungry heart. Yeah.
And Don mentioned it, or someone in the audience mentioned it too. It's no coincidence that the directors dropped the date of December 1941, right? They're trying to tell you this movie is happening just as that shift is happening, right? So no coincidence. And I'm glad you got a Bruce Springsteen reference in a World War II cruise. It's very well done.
He's my man. Yeah.
He's got you.
We were told that the world premiere of this movie was made in Lisbon.
No, that's not right. That's not right. It was premiered in January, nationally. The film came out, you could see it pre-production. You could see it just post-production in December, but the big premiere was in New York in January of '43. Yeah. There were a lot of things that I heard in Lisbon that I don't know. Like that being the largest, most important Allied port of World War II. That's crazy.
wondering what the origin of the footage that showed the Germans approaching Paris was.
There was just stock archival footage that they had from the newsreels of that time. The Germans put stuff out, and we had ways of getting some of it or whatever here, especially prior to our entry into the war. But that was what that came from.
And Koch, the one of the writers, he left the film for a while to work with Frank Capra on that Why We Fight series.
I bet the Epstein brothers.
They worked on it as well.
They worked on it a lot, yeah.
Were there any of the characters based upon actual figures?
Someone had asked that. Yeah, Laszlo is based on a real character whose name Richard. He's got like 3-4 British names. Who was one of the? I'll look him up. I'll get his exact name unless one of you two gentlemen know him. Very long name, but he not only was one of the original kind of international resistance figures tying all this together. He was one of the early supporters of the United Nations. I'll get his name while we're talking here. I can sort of picture it, but through my jet-lagged brain, I can't think of it. But the answer is yes. He is based on a real person.
Any others?
That I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of.
Let me see if I can find his name while we're sitting here.
In the Vichy world, how representative was the Louis character, especially the early Louis character, and how he behaved with and for the Germans?
I would say, not unrepresentative, in the sense that they're trying to, maintain the independence of a neutral state, but obviously doing that with the full awareness that Germany is sitting in Paris and has those 1.5 million Frenchmen. So you want to make as much of a statement as you can that you're in unoccupied France and I don't have to listen to what you tell me. On the other hand, that major is going to go back. Well, he's not, but he probably would go back. And if they say, hey, those guys cooperated with you, then that means one thing for Paris and those POWs. If they say, no, these guys weren't helping, they weren't doing what we needed them to do, it means something else. So they're in this very difficult position, which is why Louis doesn't answer the question when he's asked, are you pro-Vichy or are you Free French? What he's trying to do is, number one, make sure that the autonomy of unoccupied France is respected. And what this film doesn't really hint at, the other thing, as I said this morning, make sure that when decisions are made about local governance in North Africa, it's people like Louis that are making those decisions. So that they're trying to walk that line as carefully as they can. I'll never find this news.
And the big downer. Are you ready for it? Dooley Wilson was a very talented musician who played the drums and sang and performed. He did not play the piano.
It was played off screen, and they mimicked, just bouncing on the keys there. Yeah. But he is terrific in this. I think that's.
That's another important dimension
Richard,
of the
an
film.
unimportant point.
Yeah, it was the movie was deemed widely in the black community, particularly, as a tremendous breakthrough, because the Dooley Wilson character is the first black character in an American film who is not in some sort of subordinate world. Yeah, and he's really depicted as the friend and cohort of Rick, whatever here. Basically standing as an equal, and there's several reviews in the black press at the time about no Uncle Tomism whatsoever in the Dooley Wilson character.
And that's not quite true. There's Showboat, and there's an incredible character in Showboat. I mean, singing Old Man River, yeah, and singing it with dignity. Later played by Harold Robeson, and with dignity in the film and on Broadway. And that, of course, was done in the early 30s. Actually, done in 1927, 28, yeah, by Siegfried. And,
Mike here.
Interesting how the map of Africa at the beginning of the film has changed so dramatically.
We're going to talk a lot about map changing on this thing. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Did we,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, were you all set? Did we maintain embassies in any of these countries in Northern Africa and like in Portugal and?
Oh yeah.
Did we?
Yeah.
So would they not
Oh,
have
yeah.
been a center for getting people in and out and about as far as signing, passage letters and that sort of thing?
Yes and no. The big problem is that the United States Senate had passed in 1924 incredibly restrictive immigration laws that, among other things, removed all power for immigration from the executive branch, which is what embassies and consulates report to. So, just to give you an example, the Jewish refugees that left Germany and Austria in 1938, the bulk of those visas did not become available until 1949, 1950, despite the Second World War, despite the Holocaust, despite everything that we knew what was going on, which is another whole history that we don't have time to get into now. So the answer is there were creative embassy and consular officials who figured out creative math and figured out ways to get some things processed. Many, 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 many more State Department people were just saying, nope, I'm not signing anything.
Well, I think everybody's hungry.
Yeah.
But I just have one piece of advice. If this is the first time you've seen it, watch it again.
Thank you guys. And I know a lot of people are going to get ready for the